Hello, I am Jill Palla. I have been coming up to camp since 1994, and I have always been a member of the in-camp program. I started off working as a babysitter and loved camp so much, I wrote Mac Rand a letter and got my own job working here, helping out with arts and crafts and Indian lore, and eventually worked my way up to being program director. And before we tell you a little more about our panel, I'll have our other moderator introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Emily Baranich. My first year was 2006. I started off on the waterfront and have been on the waterfront the past 8 summers. And the past 3 or 4, I've been program director for second half when Jill leaves. My dad and grandpa and my uncles came here in the 60s, and my brother came here in the 90s.
So we all know when we hear Camp Pathfinder, we think canoe tripping camp. It's a tripping camp. That's what I tell everyone when I say I work at a camp in the summer. I work at a boys' canoe tripping camp, though I don't actually canoe trip. A big part of what has grown out of the last 40 years at camp, and even before that with Chief Norton, was the in-camp program. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about how our in-camp program has grown over the years, the pillars, the various activities, the awards that were offered, and we have an all-star lineup here of folks to talk about that. So I'd like to ask our panel to please introduce themselves and let us know what your relationship to the in-camp program has been.
Okay, Lance Kennedy, and I guess I was program director for about 25 years. When I first started doing it with Slade in about 1962 or 3. Lou Montgomery from Cornell University was the program director when I was here as a camper, and pretty soon we were kind of helping Monty out in the lower office when he was doing the program, and before long we were doing the program. And you don't want us to go into wax anecdotal here. We just move it on who we were.
Hi, I'm Mary Chestnut, and I started in '79 on the swim dock. Then mid-'80s kind of transitioned into the office with Mac and worked with Mac on the program for probably 3-4 years. And currently I work in the office with Mike and Glenn, and we'll go from there in a bit.
Is this one working?
Some of them do.
Okay. All right. My name's Katie Rand. I tell the campers that I was born here. That's a little bit of a lie. I've been here most of the summers of my life. I think I might have missed 1 out of 31. I was swim staff for a couple years. I was waterfront director for 4 years. And now that I'm able to come back with a teaching job, have some summer time off, I've spent 2 summers as the Mick and Chip director. So they call me Mama Katie down in Mick and Chipville. And as long as I'm teaching, I anticipate spending some time here in the summers.
Hi, my name is Mitchell Anderson, and I was here as a camper starting in 1968, right on through 1983. And turns out when I was a camper, I didn't really know there was an in-camp program because I was trying to be out of camp more than in camp. And then somehow when I got to be a staff man, I was both on the tripping staff, but sometimes Mac needed me on the swim dock, so then I became the swim director, and sometimes I was helping on power crew, and I'm not exactly sure, so I feel a little bit weird that I'm on this in-camp panel, although when I was a staff man, I did spend a lot more time in camp than I expected that I would. But we did have a lot of fun, I remember, and we and Sky Folks, who was the head of the grounds pretty much, and I and Lance and Mary, we tried to keep things running while everybody was out, like GT.
Hi guys, I'm Aydin Perese, and I started in 1996. And in terms of the in-camp program, I have been running the canoe dock for 5 years now. And, yeah.
My name's Mara McCabe. My maiden name is Leighbody. I worked here for 7 summers and served on the swim dock and was waterfront director at various times as well.
Hello, my name's Brent Hurley, and I started in 1986, and I was here until 2008, and I think I've done almost every job at camp. I was a director of canoeing, director of tripping, CIT director, area supervisor, which I think is the hardest job. Career area supervisor is hell. And I would say like the biggest thing that I remember just before we get into it was just from when Lance would do it just in his head, and then Will, I started working with Will on the program and turning it into an Excel where everything would just happen automatically, and the kids were just numbers and cells on a spreadsheet. And I always just thought every time we pressed the button and it would turn out the daily population, I always thought, Lance is amazing, because it was just like, how did he do it? You know, like I just always thought that was the craziest thing. Once I actually understood how the program worked, I always would be thinking of you in Ireland somewhere in happy retirement from it. So.
If I'd been amazing, I would have learned how to do it in Excel.
So just a question to start us off would be, what do you think the biggest changes have been over the years in the in-camp program?
Well, that was the only waxing anecdotal that I was going to do. I've got 2. When I started and Monty was the program director, it was a whole different kind of camp, I think. Where there was really a well-defined in-camp program, and there were well-defined in-camp campers. And then there was the tripping program, and it ran really autonomously from the rest of the in-camp part. And significantly, if you were on the trip staff, when you came into camp, you were the trip staff in camp, and you did power crew and that sort of thing. But you really didn't do a whole lot with the in-camp program. And then similarly, the in-camp staff, nobody expected that they would ever go on a trip with the campers. Then when Swifty and Roy bought the camp, and the camp became more focused on tripping, the in-camp program had to change, because then the assumption became that everybody would go canoe tripping. Monty used to have a big part of the in-camp program was that he had a baseball league, and you would play games every day, and there would be standings published in the daily program and everything. So there had to be an in-camp population that would populate these teams so that you could play every day. And then there were the track meets and all kinds of competitions in camp. And then there were some kids that went out on tripping. So one of the things that I had to do as a transition was figure out how to make the in-camp program run without any continuity at all to the population of the camp. Just assume that it's going to be in and out. You don't know. One day you're going to have 30 Crees, the next day you're going to have 5, and there's going to be no continuity, but you're going to make it work. So it changed to a focus of most of the teaching was going to go on in the optionals in the afternoon. You got what you got, and you worked with them, and intense teaching could go on. And then most of the time in the morning, whatever you could gather together to keep them entertained, you keep them entertained in the morning. That was one big change. And then another big change was the after dinner. When I first came, every night was free time on the water. And then sometimes there'd be a council fire at the end. Sometimes there'd be a free swim in the end, depended a little bit on the weather. But that was it. Then we started doing some games after dinner, and the staff, some of the trip staff, would be intrigued by this, and they'd come up and start taking part. Well, pretty soon Roy said, the campers really like it when the staff come. So it became a requirement. You had to come. And then, by George, when they had to come, they figured out, hey, this is a lot of fun. And suddenly this barrier between the in-camp program and the tripping program dissolved after dinner and dissolved thereafter throughout the entire camp. So that was kind of cool, and the definite transition that I was there for.
just add, and obviously I've only been here under my dad since I wasn't alive prior to him being here, but I definitely think that in the last 30 or so years, the in-camp program has become much more robust. We now have the whole fleet of kayaks. We now have mountain bikes. We now have the ropes course. And so there's so many more optional activities, and those instructional periods in the morning are so much more varied than I would imagine they were 30 years ago, just because of the wealth of knowledge that our staff brings in terms of people who know how to kayak and know how to teach kids how to roll, the guys who are certified to run the ropes course and things like that. So I think the varied backgrounds of our staff have definitely contributed to making the in-camp program very strong and robust, so that the kids who are here more often aren't bored. They go to bed tired after having a very full day, whether it's in camp or on the trail.
And I think that as both a camper who wanted to be out on a trip, and as a staff man who also did a lot of in-camp, it was really key and really smart to incorporate periods of the morning and periods of the afternoon where you had to show up. You couldn't just sit on your bunk and read a comic book. You had to go there. Once you got to your period, it was up to you and the staff person that was there to make it happen and to make something exciting happen. I happen to be, as we all know, an overachiever. And it was very exciting for me to be, like going after my AAs every day, and being excited to get my canoeing and even archery and even arts and crafts, which nobody did, and get my 3 lodges at the Indian Lodge, and so that was all part of it. But the structure really made sense, and I think really makes sense in terms of responsibility for the kids.
Anyone else have a comment on the changes?
I would just, I look at, given being on the waterfront, I think, and Mary can probably attest to this, this safety is part of the program. Just watching the safety over the years change, and the emphasis was always on safety, but I wouldn't say the equipment was necessarily up to par. When I started, we had 4 long pieces of wood that were nailed together, and that was the backboard in case anything happened in the water. And I don't know who could have lifted the thing. I mean, it was ridiculous. But and then and then now there's a lot down there now, and I think that I just noticed for my purposes just a change in the years through the safety even throughout the in-camp program and our awareness of that. And we would do drills, and we've done mock scenarios of what would happen in certain situations. And unfortunately, I'm sure Mary remembers the day we actually rang the bell thinking a camper was really in the water, and it was not a mock scenario. I think it took 10 years off my life that day. But that sort of changed. But I also think with the in-camp program, I've noticed from 95 to 2001, it ebbs and flows, and it may still ebb and flow. I think some years the in-camp program, based on the talent of the staff and the abilities of the staff, there'd be one focus that's really big that summer, and then you may not have that focus for a year or two, and then you go back to something else that becomes, like ropes course is back because we have talent in that respect. So I think for my purposes, I noticed an ebb and flow in the in-camp program and what the kids wanted to do and what the camp was able to do for the kids. Has really changed. It would sort of change every year, and I think the kids kind of liked that because when they came up, they never really knew, like, what are we going to have a good ropes person? Or are we going to have this person? So I think over the years, it's really strengthened, and it's become just as important. It has to be just as important because kids still have to be here and having fun on the island if they're not tripping. So I've just kind of noticed those 2 things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing that's really changed over the last few years, not just few years, but the number of kids that come to camp has really grown. And our tripping program has also grown. However, there are more kids on the island during the summer for longer periods of time. It's not like Crees come in and they stay here for 1 day and then they're right back out. A Cree group might come in and they're here for 4 or 5 days. So we've really worked hard over the years to start to vary the programs to make sure they have a variety and have meaningful instruction while they're here at camp. one of the ways that we really started to focus on meaningful instruction was the development of the pillar activities in the early 2000s. So I was wondering if those of you who are here for the development of pillars could speak about pillars.
Can you tell us what pillars are?
The
Maybe
pillar
I know.
activities are
Maybe I know, maybe I don't.
the pillar activities are canoeing, swimming, earth lore, and ropes.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have a ropes director up here, but we do have others to speak about those other ones.
I think that was really Slads and Brackley and Eric really pushed the pillars and made them central. And arts and crafts actually was a pillar as well, I think. And then you had more directors of, right? We had more directors of things, and it just became emphasized and more qualified staff at those things, and they weren't going out as much. People were in camp more focused on those things. I remember that, and I think it was just better for the program. Like they became experts almost. The staff that were at those activities.
Can you guys talk about the campers that are attracted, like the new campers, and how the changes in the program are addressing the changes in attention span? And I mean, when we were young staffmen, there began to be choices in camps. It wasn't all around camps. There was, soccer camp, and then different kinds of camps. So with an all-around camp, how do you think that the changes in the programs have helped recruit campers? Because obviously it's working.
Yeah, it's been a lot of hard work by people like Jill and Emily to really beef up those programs, and now it's a big selling point. Things like the ropes course and our other pillars as well. It brings in a whole diverse set of kids, and the one thing that still ties them back into us and our general mission is that they still go out on those trips, and they'll get that moment where they're not necessarily going to like the first few nights on their trip, of that first trip, but there's always one moment when it clicks, and then they'll be hooked for a while.
And we've also, for kids who have varying interests, there have been varying trips in the last few years, and using the skills that they learn in the pillars, they then take them out on those trips. We've had trips that are all about, and I can't speak to this as well as perhaps Brent or Aydin could, but the fishing trips. The focus of going on that particular canoe trip was to go fishing. We've had art trips over the years. We've had earth lore trips. We've had now one of our newest things are we focus on traditional skills, and Catherine Babin and Warren McDermott have been really focused on these things, and we've had an outpost one summer. Brent could speak about that a little bit more. Sorry, you were at the outpost.
The outpost is essentially great because you can have like Babin and Warren or Henry and I did it where we're on a location on a lake, and then trips come in and meet us, do some kind of woodcraft kind of stuff that we were talking about in the last session. The kids get their vision animals or whatever, and you have like a sweat lodge, and they get really into like building stuff, and then they go and continue on. And the food, right? We teach them how to use reflector ovens. They have great big stews, and then they continue on, and then another trip will come in, and that actually really requires coordination between the DOT, the director of program, the trip staff. Like everyone has to really, like Lance, you were saying how they were really separate before, and that requires them to be really coordinated to a high degree, and the kids have a great time. It's
Do
pretty
the
fun.
trips meet up, or
The trips will not meet up.
They
They just know where to go.
Yeah,
And then they go, and then another one will come in. And I don't know if they still do it. Do they still do those things?
We didn't do one
did it
this year.
summer, but they
Yeah.
did last summer.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It was. I think it's a Slad's brainchild, but it was pretty cool.
And it's,
No, it was actually on Burnt Root. It was on Burnt Root, and so we would kind of sneak in some big pots and cooking stuff that would normally not go on a canoe trip.
What do you mean sneak in?
Well, we would drive it to on a road like to Joe Lake or something, and then like Henry and I we shot up through the otter slides really quick to get up to this island, and then set it up, and then when we left, or Warren and Babin would set it up, and then we would trade off with them and be the coordinators, and then the trips would come in. So it was really complicated, but it was fun.
It's sort of like taking the in-camp program out on the trail.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to miss an opportunity to ask so many waterfront directors sitting here about life on the swim dock and how were your summers?
Well, I think one of the things that Mara mentioned in terms of safety, I think that's definitely evolved down in the swim dock. And the swim staff, I know Slads used to say to me that by dinner on July 2nd, he could ask me who any camper was in the dining hall, and I would know who they were, because as the swim staff and as the waterfront director, you see every single camper on the first day of camp. And so we were kind of the ones who were, responsible for knowing who was who and who lives with who and who are good pairings for trips and things like that, because the swim staff do see every single camper at least once a day while they're here for instructional swim, plus for polar bear, plus for a free swim, and then after dinner free swim. And so I think, being on the waterfront, we really had a good sense of who these boys were, who we were working with, and got to know them really well pretty quickly, which was definitely a plus of being down there.
Yeah, I agree. You get to, you're like their mom and their sister, and, you're that female figure that, some people send their kids up here really young. We've had some really young kids through the years, and they needed that. But as Katie said, the benefit of that, and it never changed. You got to know. In fact, Aydin, I distinctly remember the first day that Aydin arrived at camp. It was hilarious because for some reason the kids just love to they like to make fun of me. There's this like constant game up here for a long time. They just some of them just knew how to get at me. But Aydin shows up on day one and, oh, hi, Aydin. He's like, so where's your hair dryer? How do you do your hair here? And he's just like, I'm like, what? Who is this kid? And I'm laughing. Do you remember that? Oh, oh my God, you were a riot as a kid. But now it's so neat because we have gotten to see everybody, and with the staff too. You just get to know everybody in a different way than a lot of people do. And so now to see all these people that you were responsible for when they were 8 years old up here as young men, and there's an element of pride to it where you're just like, it's wonderful to see everybody and who they are and what they're doing. And I always thought we had such a great job down there because you did get to know people, and you really had, you had a lot of fun with it. It wasn't just about like sitting there and being in the sun. You really had a chance to build relationships with campers that, not all the staffmen necessarily got to do. And we were really lucky to have that experience for sure, I would say.
And we also did get the good tan, but that was
true. That was a plus.
I felt like I was lucky to start at camp when Punch Gannett was here. And I learned a lot about teaching from learning from him. And I became a swimmer, competitive swimmer, all the way through my sophomore year in college because I was pushed and pushed and pushed by the right energy. And I feel like, I hope that when I was in that summer that I was director of the Waterfront, I hope that same sort of love and care that you were talking about, but also the sense that you are nudging these kids forward in a skill that they'll always have. And these kids were, pretty much we all swam really well by the time we left.
I agree.
Can I just share how my brother learned how to swim? I'm pretty sure Norm Rogo threw him.
And the RoboDoc, I remember that.
RoboDoc and tied a rope to him, and then would use a stick and keep him away from the shore. And then it worked, though. He's a really good swimmer.
And he didn't drown. He's still around. I saw him today, this morning. Yeah.
We did not do that. We never did that.
Top-notch teacher.
Jeff?
I remember Norm, and I remember a kid that just wouldn't swim all
sweat it. He swam. I paid 100% another year.
And also one of the cool things is that on July 1st, when it's still pretty cold out there, we all arrived as campers, and we were in that water within 30 minutes of arriving on the water. And that was important. You know, not only because to go out to the raft and back and pass your canoe test, but to get in that water, to feel that the first time. And everybody did it. And Normie, I mean, God bless him, he was, when I was 8 years old, he was a scary dude. But he also had so much love. Like, he had so much care, and he wanted to help so much. And I never was at the robot dock learning to swim because I was just, a fish right away. But I think that he was formidable in people's lives. Yeah. Time to go.
Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for the in-camp program. I believe it is time to move on to our next panel. I think, okay, time for questions. Anyone?
I just want to say one more quick thing before it. The last maybe 10 or so years, and this is because of Brent and Adam and Steve and Kyle and Zach, it's been really great because I think pretty much every year, every female in terms of Waterfront, in terms of a nurse, in terms of arts and crafts, has gotten to go out on a trip, and that didn't used to happen. And that is so wonderful because the girls, you guys talk about brain rot on trips. You get pretty brain rotted sitting on the swim dock for a month, every single day, day in and day out. So it's so refreshing and rejuvenating to get off the island for a few days to see what the trip staff do. It brings us back with another, a whole newfound respect for what goes on the trails all the time, but also has been a way for us to, kind of come back refreshed, relaxed, ready to, start another few weeks on the dock. And that's just been, maybe the last 10 or so years because of those DOTs have really made room in the schedule and let the ladies get out, and that's been really awesome, too. So, thank you.
Benji, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I haven't been here in a lot of years, but it's pretty obvious camper numbers are up and there's a heck of a lot more staff. Is there any type of carrying capacity with how many kids and staff can be on the island for the program to continue to work? The great problem is grow and grow and grow, but is there a number of campers that might be too many?
I think as long as we have the beds, we have the we have the room for the kids. It's honestly, sleepage is what determines the number of campers and staff. And we've been lucky enough the last few summers to have there's usually about 80 staff on the roster. And then at one particular time, we can have about 115. Now, when you look at our rosters these days, they include A session and B session for first half, so the numbers might go up to 140. Or C and D session second half this year, we were at, 151? 151, but at any one time on the island, we had around 115, 120 kids with the 80 staff. So that really, the capacity for sleepage, the capacity in the dining hall, I think everyone here would agree we don't want to have to go to multiple seatings of meals at camp. That would really take away from the feeling of togetherness. Unfortunately, we have to do that today with so many people here for the reunion, and we wouldn't want camp to turn into that. So it's really the capacity of our facilities that are keeping us from growing anymore. But this is a great number, and the program really works when we have enough people in camp to run it and enough people to run the tripping program at the same time. It's been working well. Anyone have other? Sorry, I took that one. Yeah. Okay. Good job. Thanks. All right. Thank you all.